FNAF's anniversary week was one to remember. From the 6 hours of corporate edging that Scott put us through on the collab announcement, to the multiple banger games and demos that came out, I'm still catching my breath. But one of the biggest reactions of the fandom came from the Steelwell announcement on August 6th for the upcoming FNAF game, Five Nights at Freddy's Secret of the Mimic. And it looks good. Like, it looks so good, I almost put off doing the Into the Pit video for this week so I could make this video last week, but obviously that would be insane. Regardless, even though this teaser is only 45 seconds long, we got a lot of information from it, especially when considering the surrounding context. So slices, put on your aprons, and let's bake ourselves some predictive analysis. Right off the bat, the guy in the box looks a lot like the Mimic. And if you disagree, the title of the game is Secret of the Mimic. So for all intents and purposes, I'm just going to assume this is the Mimic moving forward. That being said, I can already hear some of you unsure on who the Mimic is, or at least what we know about it. So it's probably best to do a brief overview on all the information we have about the Mimic. But hey, if you're already a Mimic expert, I chapter my videos for a reason. The bulk of the information we have about the Mimic comes from the Tales from the Pizzaplex short stories. Currently, I think it makes the most sense to assume these books give us secondary information about the timeline that the games don't have time to delve into. So what does the book say about the Mimic? A long time ago in the company's history, a man named Edwin Murray was hired by Fazbear to convert costumes into animatronics. However, Edwin was a single father and not a very good one. Because of this, his 5-year-old son David got on his nerves a lot, so he created a program called Mimic 1 that would essentially take any incoming information and replicate it. He then put it into the upper half of an endoskeleton that could observe data. The idea was to make a toy that could play with his son and learn as it does. Thus, the Mimic was born. It would see David's actions and copy them, essentially learning how to play with him on the fly. Unfortunately, because Edwin is a bad parent, one day David sneaks out going after a thrown ball into oncoming traffic and dies. Later on, still struck with grief, Edwin sees the Mimic continuing to copy David's actions, even holding David's favorite plushie. Losing himself, Edwin beats the Mimic to an inoperable state. The story cuts forward some time, where after Edwin goes MIA, Fazbear sends a team of engineers to retrieve whatever Edwin was working on for the company. While there, they find that they're actually the second team of engineers that Fazbear has sent, where the first one found the Mimic, repaired it, and the Mimic proceeded to kill them in brutal ways, notably in ways similar to the chores the Mimic already knew how to do. Alright. In example, one man was crushed into a refrigerator as if the Mimic was putting away leftovers. The Mimic then kills Team B in a much more aggressive manner that doesn't really resemble any kind of chore. He literally picks one of the guys up by their back and then just slams him into a wall Turtlehead style. It's crazy. That was the story The Mimic. But there are other important instances of the Mimic and its programming throughout these books. In the story The Storyteller, much later into the life of the Fazbear franchise, they've opened their Mega Pizzaplex, and in it they want to replace the creative team with an AI that can generate stories for them. And just like real life, this is a horrible idea and should never be attempted. They plan to put this computer inside of a massive baobab tree with its roots going throughout the entire Pizzaplex. Edwin Murray, much older but now the head of the creative team after an acquisition, is against this idea, and he begins snooping to see what's really going on. He finds that the source of the AI being placed inside the baobab tree is the large head of a tiger animatronic, the sight of it sending him into a panic attack. He gets even deeper and goes inside the tree and finds out that the program inside the head is none other than the Mimic 1 program. He tries to stop it, but over time the Pizzaplex starts going awry anyway. The animatronics are acting in much more exaggerated and dangerous manners, and other malfunctions keep occurring. Eventually, to stop the snooping, the chairman of the board, Mr. Burrows, decides to trap Edwin inside of the baobab tree. His thinking is that eventually Edwin would have to call for help and get caught by the authorities. But after 3 days, Edwin never called for help. And worried that Edwin might have snuck out somehow, Mr. Burrows goes into the baobab tree himself, to which the door behind him shuts. Inside, he finds that Edwin Murray is dead, surrounded by scribbles and drawings on several pieces of paper, all with "I'm sorry" written on top of it. He tries to call for help, but no one can hear him, the air inside slowly depleting. The story then ends. This story is especially important, because I believe it gives us good evidence for the theory that the base of Glitch Trap is the Mimic 1 program. Think about the security breach Pizzaplex. The animatronics are dangerous caricatures of themselves. Chica is a foodie, but now she eats anything in front of her. Monty is a meathead, but now he's a violent aggressor. So on and so forth. This leads many to believe that the virus infecting the Pizzaplex is the Mimic 1 program. And visually it always shows up as Glitch Trap. Not only that, but in Help Wanted, Glitch Trap shows up after they scanned in old technology given to them by Fazbear. And once in there, Glitch Trap starts mimicking the lines of the girl recording the tapes, among other things. So if that's the program, what of the physical endoskeleton? Well, we get some more mimic action in the epilogues of the story, where several contractors were told to clear out the old FNAF 6 pizzeria so that they could put in a sort of museum down there. But while doing so, some animatronics arrive much too early, including a burnt endoskeleton except for a brand new shiny chrome head with rabbit antenna. One of the contractors realizes that this endoskeleton has a very specialized program in it, and he modifies it to give it the command to find the random animatronics scattered about, take off their arms and head, and place them into a pile. And this works wonderfully until it runs out of animatronics, to which it turns to the contractors still in the building and starts tearing them apart and adding them to the pile. Later, some teens sneak into the area, and to the mimic's point of view, more bodies have been added to the room that it was told to clear out, and it begins tearing them apart too. During this, we learn a few things about this iteration of the Mimic. At one point, Fazbear tried an entire line of Mimic endoskeletons so that they wouldn't have to program it, they could just teach it how to dance. But they were discontinued after they copied humans in unexpected ways. At one point, it tries to lure the teens into a trap by pretending to be a stuck child in a room over the radio. It's able to repair itself and contort its body to fit into almost any exoskeleton. And at one point, we actually get the perspective of the Mimic, to which we don't sense any malice. It really is just following the code that it was given. Find bodies, take off the arms and head. It just doesn't see a difference between people and animatronics. The epilogues end with the last teen tricking it into a Springlock jester costume and activating the Springlocks, once again crumpling the Mimic inoperable. So that's the bulk of what we learn about the Mimic in the books. There are several other stories about things going wrong in the Pizzaplex due to the Mimic 1 program, but as far as the Mimic itself, that's about it. So what have we seen of the Mimic in-game? Not too much outside of Ruin, where it's the star. In it, we see it's capable of luring Cassie to the Pizzaplex, and pretending to be Gregory over a walkie-talkie so she'll disable the security protocols and free it. Inside, we find a room filled with old felt costumes, and then the Mimic. In one of the endings, it's even wearing a stitched-together combination of a few of the costumes. It's also nearby a similarly old piece of technology, the Mexis console, and through the cave away from it leads to a new version of what looks like a scooper. So yeah, that's a lot of mystery as to what the Mimic is doing here and what everything around it is supposed to be. Not to mention what's happened to it in this franchise. Even just by going from the books, all we know is its origin and what it's doing now. It looks like this new game is going to be the perfect exploration as to what happened between those moments. So after all this time, let's talk about the damn game. The teaser itself opens showing us some film grain, which is an interesting choice. This could mean that the game itself is just a recording that we're rewatching, or it's just another way to show how far back this game is taking place. There's a third option I just want to touch on. In all of the marketing, it says a new nightmare from Steel Wool, which to me says, is it possible this whole game is a dream? Maybe, but that's probably just flavored wording. Then the shot continues to show us some very 70s looking carpeting, almost in reference to The Shining with similar shots and carpet importance. And knowing how much Steel Wool likes to reference and take inspiration from movies, I'm willing to bet this Shining reference is actually on purpose. Moving forward, we hear Grandfather's Clock, or the song that plays when subduing the Mimic in FNAF 2 and its iterations. We then see a very old-fashioned looking Jack-in-the-Box box, but instead of looking like the traditional gift box the puppet is in, it's fancier with golds and blues. Eventually the crank stops, but instead of the puppet or Jack-in-the-Box, we see the Mimic opening the lid, wearing some sort of costume. Looking at it, my current best guess is a Jester Springlock suit. Multiple times in the book, that Jester Springlock suit is mentioned but never explained, so it seems really possible. And furthermore, looking at how clown marionettes looked back in the 70s, I have reason to believe the full face shape will be something similar to this, and I think it's going to be terrifying. Then the film grain burns, the year 1979 flashes on screen, and the teaser ends. So what does this trailer actually tell us? Well, the year 1979 is amazing because I can count on one hand how many FNAF games give us an unambiguous date that they take place. But this year also lines up with the time frame that we have for the Fall Fest, meaning this could be our Fall Fest game. The dates we have for Fall Fest are 1970 and 1983. So if this was an annual event, this lines up right in the middle. And we're fairly sure that Fall Fest ended in a fire, and this film burning could be an allegory for that. Or if not, there's also frames of the film before it burns that look like there's fire being overlaid. Not to mention this entire video that I made talking about Fall Fest and clowns and sister location back in February. To summarize, in that video, I made the case that Fall Fest was sort of a testing ground for new characters, and the fan favorite ones were made into animatronics and put into restaurants. The Mimic would line up perfectly with that idea, and this game might very well be the origin for the entire franchise. And we have even more reason to believe this. The main tagline they've been running with is, "To see the future, sometimes you need to understand the past." Even more hints that this is our dark explanation origin game that fans have been begging for. So if it is, what is that origin going to be? Well, Brian Framerth, design director at Steelwool Studios, quote tweeted the trailer with this quote, "The evil that men do lives after them. The good is oft interred with their bones." This isn't just a cool line, this is Shakespeare. In the play Julius Caesar, Mark Antony is saying this at Caesar's funeral, but he's speaking about Brutus. In the play, Brutus betrays Caesar, stabbing him along with many of their councilmen in order to, in their minds, save Rome. Mainly since Caesar is a very bad dude. In fact, Brutus and Caesar is one of the most famous betrayals in all of fiction and, well, history. The quote is often interpreted to mean, even though what Brutus did was good, that good will be forgotten, and only the brutal act he did will be remembered. Now, is this a hint that this game is going to feature some major betrayal that kicks off the series? I mean, maybe, but when I see this line, it kind of less so leans into betrayal, and more so just explains the Mimic's entire origin story from the books. The Mimic seems to be created with good intentions, but no matter how good those intentions were, all that remains are the evil acts that it's doing. Speaking of the books, this will be a great game to finalize the debate on whether or not said books are within the game's continuity. After all, we know exactly why, when, and how, well, not the year for when, but we know why and how exactly the Mimic was made, and then it was collected by Fazbear. We can assume that this game takes place after it was collected by Fazbear and is now being used, but if we get any visuals or flashback to the Mimic's creation, and Edwin isn't the one to do it, then the books cannot be in the game continuity, so we'll see it when it comes out, I guess. So is that it? Is that all we know about this mystery character? No. In fact, as I was writing this, someone tweeted something out which may or may not have been a joke, but it's cracked everything wide open. At FNAF Paper Pals on Twitter tweeted this connection, and the moment I started thinking about it, everything connected. All the way back since FNAF 2, there was always 3 Paper Pals grouped together: the bear, the rabbit, and the clown. I never even questioned this. Many people assumed this was supposed to be Balloon Boy because he's red and blue, but that doesn't really fit into a clean explanation. After all, the bear and the bunny have distinctive features: their ears, a hat, a bow tie. You know that's a bear and a bunny. But this Balloon Boy pal doesn't have anything distinctive. No balloon, no spinny hat, nothing. Just a smiling face and a round nose. Balloon Boy's nose? A triangle, not even the same as the Paper Pal. Not to mention, 2 of these characters are the genesis of Fazbear's, Freddy and Bonnie, all the way back to their original iterations, Fredbear and Spring Bonnie. So what about the clown? I think FNAF Paper Pals is right. I think this game is going to show us that the franchise started with 3 characters: the bear, the rabbit, and the clown. And this game is going to tell us that of all the things that Fazbear is open and talking about, this clown has been scrubbed from its history. My thinking? Because it didn't join Fredbear's Family Diner with the other 2, but instead was intended to headline at Circus Baby's Pizza World and joining Balloon Boy and the others. But that restaurant never opened, and his Springlock suit was never used. All we have are the few pieces of merchandise and crafts that were left. Note the vertical split, just like the other Fun Times. So what do you think? I honestly think this is a really solid theory and could be an amazing way to expand the beginning of a franchise that we've begged for that old early lore for so long from, and in a way that still feels rooted. In the meantime, if you want to know more about the game that just came out, I have a full breakdown video of Into the Pit that you can watch right here. If you want your fan art featured on the channel, make sure to share it with #RightTart. A huge shout out to the best channel members, the Dough Risers, and until next time, as always, Stay toasty, slices.